everybody. Welcome back to Reclaim You. Emily and we're picking up on where we left off when we were talking about feeling like you're falling behind. So we're talking about what to do when you feel pressure to do it all.
This is it's a big one. It's a tough one for sure.
It is, and it's such a universal experience.
Sure is. I think that we have all felt this, at least from time to time. But
Oh, for sure.
Some of us a lot more frequently.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. We thought we'd start off with some ways in which we've felt pressure to do it all lately.
I feel like this a lot.
Same.
Honestly. I really do. And mine shows up a lot in just like the day-to-day just upkeep of life. So, and I act like this is just a thing while I have people working on my house, but like it's a thing like all the time. So I'm getting some house renovation type work done, and they've been here for like a month now.
Forever.
For like 5 weeks.
Forever.
So long. But you know, when people are in your house, they like make a mess, and there's like dirt all over my floor, and they like grubbing up on my windows, and there's like dust everywhere because they're like sanding things and walking in with like dirt all over their boots and stuff. So
yeah,
it's like, okay, I work, you know, I do my work during the day. It's like, okay, I gotta go make dinner, and now I have this like extra mess in my house, and it's like, okay, I feel like I have to like run the sweeper and like mop the floor and like do all these things, and balancing like they're gonna come back tomorrow. So like, how much do I actually want to do? But I feel like in general, like, yes, it's been worse the past month, but in general, like I put a lot of pressure on myself in that area pretty frequently. And it's hard because you only have so many hours in a day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how it's so easy to fall into certain ways of, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, but certain ways of like how you want your house to look, right? And how you want it to appear, even if no one's coming over, you know, and it's just like you and your husband and, you know, the cats and whatever, to have it like this way.
Yeah.
And to hang on to that and feel so much pressure to maintain it in that way. It can be like really, I don't know, it can just be hard to not when you usually have control over things, and this is completely out of your control.
Yeah, it makes me anxious too. Like it's that like I can't relax until this is done kind of a feeling, because I do want it to like look and feel a certain way. So it's very unsettling, and it's been a huge test for me to be like, just do a little bit. Like it's okay if you like run the vacuum just to get, you know, the dirt and leaves and all the fun things that they're tracking in. But like, do you need to mop the floor every day? Probably not.
Probably not.
We're gonna just get it messy again tomorrow. So it's been a huge test for a little bit of distress tolerance, if you will.
I would say so. It feels like it kind of goes in alignment with like having your shit together, you know, appearing like you have it all together. And that also goes, of course, into like what we talked about last time with when you feel like you're falling behind. I was talking to a friend about this, and, you know, her kind of talking about seeing people as having all of their shit together all the time, and kind of like jealous because she doesn't have her shit together, you know, quote unquote. And it's just interesting, that concept, right? And so then there's this extra pressure to have your shit together, or to like do all the things to appear like you have your shit together. And it's just like so disconnecting, you know?
Absolutely.
I know it shows up for me a lot in parenting, and also like in business, and even, you know, house stuff too. I think it's a great point, what you're going through right now, because with parenting, it's like, you should be doing this, and this, and screen time with this, and meals like this. And, you know, even doing the work that we do, I still fall into this trap of things like should be looking a certain way, and I should be doing more, you know, and I should be having more structure or less structure, or right, all of the things, you know, and then getting really down on yourself when things don't look like that, because life simply doesn't look like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you mentioned the last episode of feeling like you're falling behind, I feel like these are really closely related, because those things can also kind of transition into like, these are the things that I have to do or that I should be doing. Like, I know we talked a lot about like college and feeling like you have to have your career picked out, or like once you pick out your career, like that's it for the rest of your life, or you should buy a house, you should get married, you should do all of these things. Outside of that being unrealistic and causing feelings like we're falling behind, it's also a lot to just put on people's plates in general.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a lot to do. And
Yeah.
it's I think society puts it in like a very small window that's like acceptable to do those things.
Right. Right. So I guess let's dive into it, why you might feel pressure to do it all. I think like the most obvious thing, we should all know this, is social media.
Yeah. It's so huge. It's so huge. I think the biggest factors when I think of this, like social media for sure, and just what we're taught. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like from a very young age, we're taught, like, you should do this thing by this time, or like, this is, these are all the things that you should do every day. Like, you should work, you should get movement in, you should cook 3 meals a day, you should make sure your house is clean, you should
Walk the dog.
walk the dog, like connect with all the people in your life, go to
Uh,
bed at a certain time, do a hobby. Like, we're like told that we need to do all these things every day to be like well-rounded people, and it's a lot. So I
yeah.
think it's those two factors, social media and the way that we're kind of indoctrined as we grow up and move into the world.
Yeah. I was talking to a consultant that I have recently, and she's been a therapist for like a really, really long time. And we were just talking about life, life and being a therapist and doing trainings and all of the things.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm just so sad that like my generation did so much to try to shift things for moms and women, and this is where we are. Like, we're still here. You're feeling so much pressure to like show up the way that you want to as a mom for your kids and your family, while you're also feeling so much pressure to hold all of this other stuff in terms of like work and growth and all of that. She's like, it's just impossible,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is so true.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of something that I read, I think it was last year at some point, and it just like stuck with me because I never really thought of it that way. And I obviously this applies to any gender, but I think that it
Mm-hmm.
really shows up for women. And they were kind of talking about how back in the 40s, 50s, women, it wasn't common to work outside of
Mm-hmm.
the house. Women like took care of the house, took care of the kids, cooked dinner. That was kind of their day to day. And then as society shifted and women went into the workforce, that was added in, but things weren't taken away. So it was
Right.
like, you still have to take care of your house. You still have to cook dinner every night.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to do all these things, but now you're going to go work 8 hours a day.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there was never any kind of concessions made. It was just piled on.
Yeah.
So it was this really interesting point of like, it feels impossible to do it all because it literally is.
It quite literally is.
Like, there's actually not enough hours in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wish we had pulled up the stats on it. Maybe I can put in the show notes or something, like how much and we're speaking for, people who identify as women, and are navigating the mental load of, being maybe in a more like, I don't know, stereotypical setup, which I think we can all kind of fall into unless we actively fight against it, because that's how society wants us to be, right? Like, we get pushed into these like gender roles and things like that. But the stats of moms and women, how much more of a load and how much more we work, because of what's been set up in the culture. But it's pretty significant. And you're right, it's literally impossible. And that's why I think we all feel like shit.
We sure do. Because if we break that down, like going back to kind of all the things that we're told that we should do in a day,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, wake up early, get ready for work, get movement in, make all this food, go to work, come home, make sure everything's in order, get your house cleaned up, get ready for the next day. And then we pile on, spend time with your family, make sure you're connecting with people, do something for yourself. It's like, where are we supposed to get all of this time?
Yeah. Where?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. In what world is there possibly enough time?
Right. Like if we break down a day, like, most people are at work for 8 hours. So we've got that 8 hour chunk. Maybe you have a commute. Maybe you're going into the office. That could add on another hour or two. Like we're already at 9 or 10 hours. Where's the rest of that supposed to go?
Right. Yeah. And then you add in social media
Mm-hmm.
where like the clips of people's lives are showing this. Oh gosh, what's the term? Is it like, I texted Amanda to ask her if it was still a trend because I'm so out of the loop. Um, Hold on, let me look at it real quick. So I texted Amanda to ask her if that girl morning routine is still a trendy thing, right? And even if it's not, like all of the posts on social media that are like, I wake up, right? And I see a lot of mom content because that's the season of life that I'm in, little kid mom content. I wake up at 4:45 in the morning to do my workout and then do my morning routine, then to make my kids breakfast, and then to do like a sensory activity or some shit, right? Once you're in the algorithm, you don't get out, right? So then you're like bombarded with people with these seemingly picture perfect morning routines, right? Like wondering how you can possibly fit that into your everyday experience. And it doesn't account for like what your life actually looks like. It's this fake thing that's just being shoved in our faces all of the time because it's aesthetic and it's romanticized and it's so not real.
Right. Yeah. Social media is tough because I think, especially like the routine videos or like the house videos, things like that, like it's not showing the behind the scenes, it's showing the finished product. And we interpret that as this looks like this all the time. And it's like very minimal effort for them. But we don't know that. But it makes us feel like, okay, why is this so hard for me?
Yeah. And then the pressure to do more, for things to look different, for things to feel different, right? It starts to build. And not saying that people shouldn't feel like they want things to feel different or look different, but just being curious about if there's a way to approach it differently that probably isn't coming from shame that you're not doing enough or that you suck or that you can't get your shit together, right? From a more even just like neutral place of acknowledging what your life actually looks like and what your capacity actually is.
Yes. Yes. I think the pressure to do it all can also show up a lot in relationships. It's not just in our day to day, I have to do all these things. I think it also is a big thing in a lot of relationships of I have to do all of these things for other people, and maybe things that don't necessarily feel like things that I want to do, or maybe are things that I don't have time or capacity to do. That feels like another big area too.
Yeah, we were just talking about this and this. I mean, I'm working on it, right? Like this drive, right? Aren't we all? This impulse, this natural impulse to caretake and to make sure people feel okay and to not hurt people's feelings when there's something going on and you have to ask for something and you don't ask, people usually ask, and then it can turn into this thing where I start caretaking and all of that, right? Like this drive to make sure probably people aren't mad at me and that people's feelings aren't hurt. And that's even more pressure then to disconnect from yourself and to caretake other people and put yourself last, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the caretaking, the people pleasing, like not saying no, not setting boundaries. I think all of those things are pressures that are put on us in relationships.
Yeah, so relationships are big. Every day, just nitty gritty stuff, even a romanticized version of what you want your life to look and feel like, which there's nothing wrong with it, right? But how do we lean into that without the shame piece? And I think one other piece that is just important to recognize for people, especially people who experience emotional neglect as kids or had a lot of pressure as kids to achieve or to do it right or only got praise when things were perfect, that it does set a pattern in our very fiber of being that this is the way that you have to be in the world to get love and care and attention and all of those things that as little people in the world we're deserving of inherently. But, when there's I don't know, it's like when there's a thing that you have to do to achieve it, it sets up a pattern in our nervous systems to have to continue to engage in that.
Absolutely. So it just adds on to the pressure.
Yeah. And then you pile up society and the current social media situation and all of that. It can feel kind of inescapable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what to do when we feel this way? What do you do when you feel this way?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like it's always a good sign to take a little social media break. I've been very into just like deleting apps off my phone,
Mm-hmm.
especially during the week for like productivity and just, yeah, to, because it's just like a time suck and it doesn't feel good. But yes, I think taking a social media break is a big one because the more you're bombarded with it, the worse that you're going to feel. And I think we got to break things down. So if we look at, feeling like you have to do it all in terms of like big accomplishments or goals or things like that, we're not saying that you can't have those goals. We're not saying that you can't want certain things for yourself, but how much pressure are you putting on? How much pressure are you putting on yourself to achieve things in like a short period of time? And I'm thinking of that last episode of like getting a job, getting a house, getting a relationship, all these things. Like, again, those are fine things to want, but can we kind of step out of it needs to be done in a certain timeline? I think that that can be helpful. Like, we can have this goal, but why does it have to be done in a certain amount of time? Can we kind of get curious about that? I think
Yeah.
that can take some pressure off.
Yeah, for sure. It also helps you just shift the way you're moving towards those things.
And I think in general for the day to day stuff too, we got to break it down. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of a list. I love a list, like, get it out of my head because that mental load is real and it's exhausting. So get it out, write it down. And I'm almost like a to list kind of a girl. Like, I have like
I
my
probably have like 7 lists.
I have like my big kind of ongoing list, but then I will do a daily, like, I'm going to pick out 2 or 3 things to do today instead of like the 25 things on the ongoing list.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's helpful in terms of task to
Mm-hmm.
just not feel like you have to do everything in a day
Mm-hmm.
because the chances are that's not going to happen and it's just going to stress you out and make you feel bad. Then I think we have to, for some of these kind of more ongoing things of like, okay, every day you have to, work out, do a
Meditate,
meditate, like go
do
to
a
bed.
gratitude journal.
Right, absolutely. Like, we gotta look at that and get realistic. Like, what do I actually have time for in
Mm-hmm.
a day? Also, like, what do I actually want to do in a day?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to journal? I don't like to journal. I'll be totally honest. As a therapist, I freaking hate to journal. So, like, if you don't want to do these things, don't do them. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to.
I'm being curious about what meaning are you making about yourself if you don't do those things. I'm thinking about like the house stuff and how easy it is to want to have like, because I kind of do Joanna Gaines style, like
Yeah.
just super aesthetically pleasing. And, you know,
Yeah.
it helps my brain feel organized when things are clean and organized. It's like a sensory overload thing for me. But I know when I'm going to this place, I want it to be like this and this and this and this, right? Like there's something else going on. It's not just that my brain feels more coherent when things are organized and put away. It's some other meaning that I'm assigning to where I am right now and not being good enough, you
Yes.
know? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, Sarah, take a breath,
Yeah.
chill out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Do something that engages yourself in a different way and come back around to take care of whatever it is that's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I feel that like that's a big thing for me too, of like wanting things to be organized and clean. And like that again for me too is it's kind of like a sensory overload if it's not. And like growing up, that's kind of what like I came from, like a very like neat, tidy house. So like it just feels comfortable for me. But I do have to keep it in check. My husband is always can tell, he calls it like when I get the zoomies, like I'm just like a tornado around the house and it's like 10 p.m. and I'm like vacuuming and cleaning the bathroom and like
Uh-huh.
doing all this stuff. And like it is normally because there's an outside
Mm-hmm.
stressor or like I feel like I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish in the day. So I'm trying to like load it in.
Yeah.
And I really need to check in with myself and be
Mm-hmm.
like, is the world going to end if you don't run the sweeper right now? Or can you just go to bed? Can you just like go read a book, like chill out, wind
Mm-hmm.
down? I feel like we gotta check in with ourselves and ask like, how much of a priority is this? What is actually going to happen if I don't do this right now?
Right. What is my capacity actually? Instead of overriding yourself over and over again, because we can so easily do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I think about growing up and I don't feel like my house was super chaotic, but it certainly wasn't neat and tidy. And so I remember as a kid, like organizing all the papers on our breakfast bar into stacks because it was too much for my little brain to hold. And I shared a room with my sister. I have a twin sister and we shared a room. I used to draw a line with duct tape down the middle of the room and I would throw all of her shit on the other side of the, so my side was completely neat and organized and her side was like chaos. Which is just hysterical about how now I get on these foods and I buy baskets and my husband's like, you're buying baskets. What's going on? And I'm like, things need to be more organized. And he's like, I think we have enough baskets. Stop buying baskets. But it's the same thing. It's like a response in my system to something that feels unsettling. And so I think that can show up, in so many ways. I think about how it was like almost 10 years ago at this point when I first opened my practice. I would like get so overwhelmed with, seeing other people having a private practice. And, maybe I didn't feel like I was doing it as fast or as well or whatever the narrative was at the time. And I used to just like on the floor in my kitchen on the tile floor with my dog next to me. And just, this is so random, but the coolness of the floor and the dog just laying next to me as a comfort, it would actually let me come back to what am I doing? Why am I doing this? How can I take care of myself differently? But I think that that's something that we can apply to lots of situations. Like when you're feeling that much pressure and swirly and like you're not doing enough or you're not doing fast enough or as well as enough and all of those narratives, what can we do to soothe ourselves to come back to what's actually true?
Absolutely. Yeah, when I feel like that, I will make myself like sit down. If it's during the day, sometimes I'll go for a walk, like just to get out of the house. I'm also like a big yoga girl, so sometimes I'll like make myself to go do yoga, like just to get a break. And then, like you were saying, it normally gives me enough space to be like, you're okay. If it's earlier in the day, I'm like, let's look at the rest of our day. Let's like pick out like a couple reasonable things to do. But if it's later in the day, it kind of gives me that space to be like, you can stop. Like it is late. Like it's okay to wind down. It's okay to go get ready for bed, read a book. You don't need to do anything else.
Right. Like what you're doing is enough. Like just kind of like existing is actually enough,
Yeah.
On some days that feels super effortful anyway.
Yeah. But I think it can be helpful too, like if you're able to kind of tune into what else is going on for you. Because I do feel like, and it seems unrelated, but I feel like it is really related. Like a lot of us will clean or organize if we're feeling overwhelmed or like not accomplished in other areas. Like it comes out in that area for a lot of people. And like, sure, that can be like a stress reliever in some ways, but we definitely have to put boundaries on that so that we're not doing too much and then like making ourselves feel worse.
Right. And so that we can actually get to the root of what's truly going on, that maybe things don't feel safe or contained, or you don't feel heard, or you don't feel seen, or, whatever could be bubbling under the surface. If we're just continuing to cover things up with basket buying and rage cleaning, like we're not actually taking care of that thing underneath that's spurring all of these different ways of trying to feel better. Like me doing another accent wall in my house is not going to make my life feel significantly better.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm even thinking too, like for me, it feels connected to like the broader topic. When I put too much pressure on myself to do too many things or have my day look a certain way of like, wake up at this time and do this at this time and you got to do all these things. Like if I inevitably don't have time to do all those things or I don't feel like doing all those things, like by the end of the day, I start to feel a little like, why can't I just do that? And then I'll get into the like, well, let me go clean and organize because then at least I'll feel accomplished. So that for me is almost like a coping mechanism when I feel like I fell behind in my day because I put unrealistic expectations out there for myself.
Right. And just to add, like, what a privilege it is for people who are able to do all of these things, wake up at 4:45 in the morning and do their, special thing and then do their morning magical routine and go to work and have time and space to do arts and crafts with their kids. In lots of ways, it's a privilege, and it doesn't account for physical health, right? It doesn't account for mental health. It doesn't account for, people who are working really hard in their jobs, but aren't making enough to have that much time and space in their days. And, those are all things that I think we have to account for when it comes to your capacity or our capacity and what's actually possible in our lives.
Yes. I think especially with social media, we have to be careful with that because a lot of times these are content creators and that is their job. Like
their job
is to create content. They're not going to a 9 to 5. They're not doing like a job that, a lot of us may think of when we think of like a typical full-time job. Like making social media videos is literally their job. So we got to remember that too.
Any final thoughts when you're feeling pressure to do it all?
Yeah, so I think just a little summary when you're feeling that pressure. Let's check in with ourselves. Where is that coming from? Are we feeling unfulfilled in certain areas? Are we feeling kind of out of control in certain areas? Are we putting too much pressure on ourselves? So doing that check-in. Take a break if you're kind of caught in the swirl of that. Like go to a different room in your house, go outside for a second, like put feet in the grass. Like
feel the cold tile floor beneath your back.
Yes, absolutely. Take a second, check in, give yourself some space to regulate. I think looking at the societal pressures for some of these bigger things is always important to recognize that it's not coming from you, it's coming from a system that's much larger than you. And then break things down. We literally cannot do everything in a day. So let's break things down. What are one or two things that you can do today that can make your life a little easier, but still not put too much pressure on yourself? And social media breaks.
Social media breaks for sure.
Social media breaks.
Yeah. And I'll just add, like, if you know about yourself, if you know it to be true that, like, this is how you've gained recognition or love or validation or praise. If you know that's part of your story, that you've had to function in the world in this way to try to do it all, I think that working with a therapist can be super helpful. I think it's a lifelong journey a lot of times to unwind, your self-worth from the facade of what it's like to do it all or to appear like you have your shit together and all of that. And I think that, trauma therapy especially can help you start to untangle some of the root level stuff.
Absolutely. Even to have some accountability too. I think when we think of accountability, we think of it as accountability to do things, but sometimes we need accountability to not do things. And I think therapy can also be helpful with those reminders of like, that feels like a lot. Like, what's going on? Can we break things down?
Right. Yeah. As an outsider to say like,
yeah,
I'm noticing this. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? Yeah.
Sometimes that can be helpful just to have somebody there to also check in with us and remind us like we are doing enough.
Yes. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And everyone, if you, have questions or if you want to talk about this more, let us know. And otherwise, we'll be back next week. So take good care.
Bye, everybody.